For centuries, the Galactic Empire of Kestevar reigned supreme. Their banner of silver and obsidian unfurled across countless worlds. Dominance came not merely through technology, but through fear, a fear that paralyzed weaker species into submission. To the Kestevarians, fear was the ultimate weapon, and they wielded it masterfully. When the Empire encountered humanity, they expected another species to crumble under the weight of their oppressive presence. They were wrong. Pathetic, General Vraxis sneered, watching the humans' first envoy approach on the view screen. The Terran ship was functional, sleek even, but unimposing compared to the angular monstrosities of Kestevarian design. Its lack of spikes, massive hull-mounted cannons, or pulsating dreadlights, common features in Kestevarian ships, reeked of weakness. They don't even adorn their vessels with intimidation marks, his second-in-command, Captain Riekl, remarked, leaning forward to better scrutinize the ship's unremarkable gray surface. Do they believe diplomacy will shield them? Vraxis' nostrils flared. Diplomacy is a language of prey. These humans will beg, as they all do. Open the comms. The transmission came through, revealing a human ambassador seated behind a polished desk. She had sharp eyes, calm yet piercing, but the general focused instead on her fragile form, soft and unarmored. Even her voice was devoid of the guttural menace that the Kestevarians respected. I am Ambassador Li Chun of the Terran Union, she began. We come in peace and seek mutual understanding. Vraxis grinned, baring his serrated teeth. Peace is the creed of the feeble, Ambassador. Mutual understanding? It seems you misunderstand your position. He leaned closer to the screen. We are Kestevar, conquerors. Submit or be eradicated. Ambassador Chen's face betrayed no fear. She tilted her head slightly, her voice remaining measured. It would be unwise to underestimate humanity, General. The Kestevarian officers erupted in laughter, their guttural chortles reverberating through the bridge. Vraxis waved a claw dismissively. Enough of this farce. End transmission. Prepare our fleet to subjugate their homeworld. As the screen went dark, Captain Riekl couldn't suppress his amusement. They will fall swiftly, like the others. Perhaps even faster, given their frailty. Vraxis nodded. Humans are nothing more than prey dressed in bravado. Let us teach them the price of defiance. The Kestevarian fleet descended on Earth's outer colonies like a black tide, overwhelming their defenses with ease. It was a slaughter. Terran ships, though nimble, were outgunned, and ground forces were forced into retreat after retreat. The Kestevarian generals gloated in their victory, broadcasting their conquests across the galaxy. See how the humans flee, Captain Riekl sneered during a propaganda recording, standing amid the ruins of a Terran outpost. They lacked the spirit to resist the inevitable. The Terran Union's initial resistance seemed lackluster, almost resigned, and the Kestevarians mistook this for weakness. But humanity was not merely retreating. They were observing, learning, adapting. When the counterstrike came, it began not with armies or fleets but with whispers. In the shadowed halls of the Kestevarian War Council, reports trickled in of unusual human tactics. A phrase that meant one thing: unpredictability. Entire platoons of Kestevarian soldiers were vanishing from secured positions. Ships disappeared without distress signals. Weapon stockpiles exploded without warning. Surveillance drones found nothing but empty corridors where garrisons had once stood. The first official encounter with what the humans had unleashed came on the mining colony of Utrax IV. The air was thick with tension as Commander Grelick led his squad through the winding tunnels of the Utrax IV mining complex. They had received reports of human insurgents, a laughable notion given their supposed cowardice. Still, the orders were clear. Root out the vermin. Thermal scanners are picking up heat signatures, a soldier reported, his voice tinged with unease. But they're erratic. Could be environmental anomalies. Grelick scowled. Humans don't have the nerve for guerrilla tactics. Proceed. The squad moved deeper into the tunnels, their footsteps echoing ominously. The dim lights flickered, and the silence became oppressive. Then, out of nowhere, the screams began. They came from the rear of the formation, where the bulk of the squad had been covering their flank. By the time Grellick turned, all he saw was chaos. Shadows moving too quickly, shapes that didn't make sense. The sounds of plasma rifles firing into the dark, mixed with guttural Kestavarian cries. "Report!" Grellick barked, but no response came. One by one, his soldiers vanished into the shadows. When the silence returned, Grellick was alone. He backed against a wall, plasma rifle shaking in his claws. His eyes darted to every flickering shadow, every faint movement. Then he heard it, a low, guttural growl that sent a shiver down his spine. Out of the darkness stepped a figure clad in black armor that seemed to absorb the light. Its face was hidden beneath a featureless visor, and in its hands was a blade, a simple, archaic weapon compared to plasma rifles. Yet there was something primal about it, something terrifying. The figure didn't speak. It didn't need to. It moved like a predator, closing the distance in an instant. Grellick fired. But the figure was already gone, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as it had appeared. The last thing he felt was cold steel slicing through his armor. Word spread quickly through the Kestavarian ranks. The humans had sensed something their soldiers began calling the Boogeymen. The Kestavarian generals had miscalculated. Humanity had always thrived under pressure, evolving into a species capable of extraordinary resilience and ingenuity when backed into a corner. In the face of annihilation, the Terran Union had turned to their most unconventional forces, the American Boogeymen. These soldiers were not just elite. They were the stuff of legend even among their own kind. Drawn from Earth's most secretive special operations units, they had spent their entire careers mastering the art of unconventional warfare. But in the depths of the Terran Union's darkest hour, these soldiers had been reshaped into something more. They were ghosts, predators who thrived in the shadows and struck terror into the hearts of their enemies. And now, they were loose in Kestavarian territory. The mining colony of Utrax IV had gone dark 2 days prior. Recon drones dispatched to investigate the sudden silence reported nothing out of the ordinary. Yet, when reinforcements arrived, they found the place abandoned. Equipment remained untouched. Supplies were intact, but every Kestavarian station there was gone. The only clue was a single word, scrawled in what appeared to be blood across the walls of the central command post. Boogeyman. For General Vraxis, the situation had grown intolerable. The humans were no longer an enemy to be conquered, but a festering wound on the pride of the Kestavarian war machine. He slammed his clawed hand against the war table, causing the holographic projection to flicker. "Explain this to me," he snarled at the assembled officers. "How does an inferior species do this? Where are our soldiers? Where is our fleet?" Captain Riegel stepped forward hesitantly. "General, the humans have altered their tactics. They're not engaging in open combat. Instead, they're deploying small, highly trained units to disrupt our operations." "Disrupt?" Vraxis barked, his voice dripping with contempt. "You mean they are dismantling us piece by piece? Is that not what you're saying, Captain?" Riegel's mandibles clicked nervously. "Yes, General. Then what is your plan to stop them?" The captain hesitated. But before he could respond, the war room's comms terminal chimed. An incoming transmission was patched through, revealing the gaunt, panicked face of a lieutenant stationed on the agricultural world of Cytrex 6. "General, we've been hit," the lieutenant stammered. The humans are here. The feed cut out abruptly, replaced by static. Then, to the horror of everyone in the room, the static resolved into an image, a figure clad in black armor, its visor reflecting the dim light of the war room. The figure held up a device, a simple recording unit, and played back the lieutenant's final words. "They're here." The screen went dark. The Kestavarian military's confidence fractured under the relentless assault of the Boogeymen. They struck at night, targeting supply lines, communication hubs, and key officers. Their methods were brutal, calculated to sow terror. Soldiers reported hearing whispers in their barracks, only to discover their comrades gone when the lights came on. Weapons depots exploded without warning, often in the dead of night, leaving only craters and scorched ground as evidence. Survivors spoke of black-clad figures emerging from the shadows, their movements too fast to track. They used weapons that were eerily silent, yet devastatingly effective. Their attacks left no room for retaliation, only questions and corpses. On the moon of Kelter 9, an elite Kestiverian battalion had established a fortified outpost to safeguard a critical fuel depot. The commanding officer, Colonel Dralek, had sworn to hold the position at all costs. His soldiers were veterans, handpicked for their experience and loyalty. Yet as night fell, unease crept into their ranks. Dralek dismissed the fears at first, attributing them to human propaganda. But as the hours dragged on, his confidence waned. Surveillance drones malfunctioned without explanation. Patrols failed to return. And then came the sound, a low, rhythmic tapping that seemed to echo through the corridors of the base. It started faintly, barely perceptible over the hum of the outpost machinery, but it grew louder, closer, until it became impossible to ignore. Dralek ordered his men to investigate, but they found nothing. Still, the tapping persisted. When the first explosion rocked the fuel depot, Dralek realized the humans had already infiltrated his outpost. He scrambled to organize a counterattack, but it was too late. The Boogeymen were inside. By the time reinforcements arrived, the outpost was silent. The fuel depot had been destroyed, and every soldier stationed there was gone. The only clue was another message, scrawled across the wall in black soot. "We are everywhere." The psychological toll on the Kestiverian forces was immense. Generals began rotating their troops more frequently, hoping to prevent prolonged exposure to the humans' unconventional warfare. But the Boogeymen adapted, striking wherever their targets were most vulnerable. On the industrial world of Tarkon 12, a Kestiverian general convened a high-level meeting to strategize against the human insurgents. The meeting was held in a heavily guarded bunker, shielded from all known forms of surveillance. Yet, as the generals debated, the lights flickered. When they stabilized, a figure stood at the far end of the room, clad in black. The Boogeyman stared at the assembled officers without a word. Before anyone could react, the figure vanished, leaving behind a small device that emitted a piercing alarm. The room was evacuated, but the psychological damage was done. The general sense of security had been shattered. "This cannot continue," Vraxis growled, his voice a low rumble of frustration. He paced the bridge of his flagship, his claws clicking against the metal floor. "We are Kestivar. We conquer. We do not cower in fear." "General," Captain Chronicle said cautiously, "the humans' tactics are unprecedented. They exploit fear as effectively as we do. Perhaps even more so." Vraxis rounded on him, his eyes blazing. "You dare suggest that we are losing?" "No, General," Chronicle replied quickly. "But we must adapt. The humans have turned our own methods against us. We need to outthink them." Vraxis stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. The humans were no longer behaving like prey. They had become something else entirely, something far more dangerous. On the distant edge of Kestiverian space, in a small, nondescript bunker, Ambassador Li Chun received a secure transmission. The Boogeymen's campaign was proceeding as planned. Reports of Kestiverian fear and disarray filled her screen. She allowed herself a small smile. "They thought we were cowards," she murmured. "Now they've learned what we do when we're underestimated." The Boogeymen had not just leveled the playing field. They had tipped it entirely in humanity's favor. And as the Terran Union prepared for the next phase of their counteroffensive, one thing became clear. The Kestiverians would never forget the shadows that haunted them, nor the humans who had become their greatest nightmare. The Kestiverian Empire was crumbling, not from the might of grand fleets or planet-cracking weapons, but from the insidious erosion of their morale. The Boogeymen had become more than soldiers. They were legends whispered in the barracks and feared in the war councils. Each strike brought with it not just destruction, but a deepening sense of helplessness. On the jungle moon of Zytral, 4, the Kestavarians had established a key research facility, hidden beneath dense foliage and shielded by a state-of-the-art cloaking field. It was here that the Empire developed its most advanced weaponry, hoping to turn the tide of war. The facility was considered impenetrable. Guards patrolled day and night, and the facility's automated defenses were capable of repelling entire battalions. Yet, as had become the norm, the humans found a way. The first sign of trouble came when the perimeter sensors failed, one by one, without triggering an alarm. Patrols reported strange sounds in the underbrush, whispers, the rustling of leaves with no wind to move them. By the time the guards realized something was wrong, the facility's power grid failed. The lights flickered out, plunging the base into darkness. When the backup generators came online moments later, the guards were met with a chilling sight. Every security camera feed showed the same image. Black-clad figures, standing in silence, their reflective visors gleaming in the dim light. Then, the feeds went dark. The Boogeymen struck with precision. Explosives took out key infrastructure, rendering the facility's defenses useless. In the chaos, the researchers and guards were incapacitated one by one. By the time reinforcements arrived, the facility was in ruins. The research data was gone, and the only survivors were left bound and blindfolded, muttering incoherently about shadows that moved like predators. Carved into the floor of the central laboratory was a single word: Boogeyman. The Kestavarian High Command convened in a secure bunker on their homeworld, desperate to develop a countermeasure. General Vraxis presided over the meeting, his usual confidence replaced by a simmering frustration. "We cannot allow this to continue," he growled. "Our forces are in disarray. Our people are losing faith, and this human plague spreads unchecked." "General," a science advisor interjected, "we've been analyzing the tactics of these Boogeymen. They rely heavily on psychological warfare. If we can disrupt their ability to instill fear—" "Disrupt their fear?" Vraxis interrupted, slamming a clawed hand on the table. "Do you not understand? They have turned fear into their greatest weapon. They are no longer mere soldiers. They are specters, mismade flesh. How do you fight an enemy that has become legend?" The room fell silent. The truth was undeniable. The humans had mastered the art of asymmetrical warfare, using their limited numbers and resources to maximum effect. They struck where the Kestavarians were weakest, dismantling the Empire from within. Vraxis's talons scraped against the table as he pondered their next move. If fear is their weapon, then we must find a way to wield it against them. We will draw them out, force them to face us in the open. The plan was simple in its audacity. The Kestavarians would establish a false base on the barren moon of Dravik 7, broadcasting encrypted signals designed to appear as if they were coordinating a major offensive. They would leak just enough information to ensure the humans took the bait. Once the Boogeymen arrived, they would be trapped, surrounded by elite Kestavarian forces with no means of escape. The trap was set. Dozens of warships patrolled the moon's orbit, while ground forces fortified the base with every conceivable defense. Hidden within the base were energy disruptors, designed to disable the humans' advanced cloaking and communication technologies. For the first time since the war began, the Kestavarians felt a glimmer of hope. The waiting was excruciating. Days passed with no sign of the humans, and tensions began to rise. Some soldiers whispered that the Boogeymen wouldn't come, that they somehow knew it was a trap. Others dismissed these fears, confident that their plan would succeed. And then on the 7th night, the shadows came alive. The attack began with a series of explosions along the perimeter, creating chaos among the defenders. The energy disruptors activated, but to the Kestavarians' horror, the humans had anticipated this. Their cloaking systems adapted, and their comms remained functional. The Boogeymen moved through the base like phantoms, striking with surgical precision. General Vraxis himself was present, commanding the operation from the central command center. He watched in frustration as his meticulously planned trap unraveled. His forces were outmaneuvered at every turn, their technological advantages rendered useless by the humans' ingenuity. "Seal the command center," Vraxis barked, his voice echoing through the chaos. "No one gets in or out without my authorization." The command center's doors hissed shut, locking with a resounding clang. Vraxis turned to his officers, his eyes blazing with determination. "We will not fall here," he growled. "The humans think they can break us, but they will learn the price of defying the Kestavarian Empire." As if in response, the lights flickered. A faint tapping sound echoed through the room, growing steadily louder. Vraxis's officers exchanged uneasy glances, their claws tightening on their weapons. The tapping stopped, replaced by a low, distorted voice that seemed to emanate from every corner of the room. "You thought you could trap us," the voice said, "but we are already here." Panic spread through the command center as the officers realized the truth. The Boogeymen had infiltrated the base long before the trap had been set. They had been watching, waiting, and now they were ready to strike. Explosions rocked the command center, and the doors buckled under the force of an external breach. Black-clad figures poured into the room, their movements a blur of calculated violence. Vraxis fought valiantly, his claws slicing through the air, but the humans were relentless. Within minutes, the command center fell silent. When reinforcements arrived, they found the base in ruins. The energy disruptors had been destroyed, and the Kestavarian forces lay scattered, defeated. General Vraxis was alive but gravely injured, his pride shattered along with his body. Carved into the wall of the command center was the humans' now infamous calling card. "We are everywhere." The defeat on Dravik 7 marked a turning point in the war. The Kestavarians, once the undisputed masters of the galaxy, now face an enemy they could not defeat through sheer force. The Boogeymen had proven that humanity was more than capable of standing against the mightiest empire in the galaxy. As the Terran Union prepared to launch its final offensive, the message was clear. Humanity would not be conquered. They would not be cowed. And the Kestavarians would forever remember the shadows that had brought their empire to its knees.